Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about the Windrush generation who've contributed so much to our country and to the armed forces in this week and all weeks? And Glenda Jackson's passing leaves a space in our cultural and political life that can never be filled. She played many roles with great distinction, passion and commitment. Academy Award-winning actor, campaigning Labour MP and an effective government minister. We will never see talent like hers again. Mr. Speaker, one of the Prime Minister's own MPs says Britain is facing a mortgage catastrophe. Does he agree with her?
Mr. Speaker, can I start by joining the honourable gentleman in his tribute to Glenda Jackson? And Mr. Speaker, it's also right that we do support those with the mortgages, and this is why the absolute right economic priority is to halve inflation. Because inflation is what is driving interest rates up, inflation is what erodes people's savings and pushes up prices and ultimately makes them poorer. Now, this is why, a long time before I had this job, I highlighted the importance of tackling inflation. It's why that I said it is never easy to root out inflation, but we will take the difficult and responsible decisions to do so. It's an approach that the IMF has strongly endorsed in their words and describing our actions as decisive and responsible.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I realise the Prime Minister spent all week saying he doesn't want to influence anyone or anything. It was certainly keeping to that with his answer. He knows very well the cause of the mortgage catastrophe. 13 years of economic failure and a Tory kamikaze budget which crashed the economy and put mortgages through the roof. So will the Prime Minister tell us how much the Tory mortgage penalty is going to cost the average homeowner?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as ever, the honourable gentleman isn't aware of the global macroeconomic situation. But let me do. But substantively, let me tell him and the House what we are doing to support those with mortgages. We have deliberately and proactively increased the generosity of our support for the mortgage interest scheme. We've also established a new FCA communal duty which will protect people with mortgages, for example, moving them onto interest-only mortgages or lengthening mortgage terms. And we have spent tens of billions of pounds supporting people with the cost of living, particularly the most vulnerable. But that is the difference between us, Mr. Speaker. While he is always focused on the politics, we are actually just getting on and doing the job.
Let's test that, because the question he refuses to answer, he actually knows the answer to this question, is £2,900 extra. That's the cost to the average family of the Tory mortgage penalty. Now, he was warned by experts about this as long ago as autumn last year, but he either didn't get it, didn't believe it, or didn't care, because he certainly didn't do anything. And when I raised this a couple of months ago, he had the gall to stand at that dispatch box and say he was delivering for homeowners. How is an extra £2,900 a year on repayment delivering for homeowners?
Well, so, Mr. Speaker, now let's just look at the facts. Let's look at the facts, because he talks about interest rates. Perhaps the honourable gentleman could explain why interest rates are at similar levels in the United States, in Canada, in Australia and New Zealand, why they're at the highest level in Europe that they've been for 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. That's why it's important that we have a plan to reduce inflation. But in contrast, what do we hear from the honourable gentleman? He wants to borrow an extra £28 billion a year. That would make the situation worse. He wants to ban new supplies of energy from the North Sea. That would make the situation worse. And he wants to give in to unions' unaffordable pay demands. That would make the situation worse. Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have many policies, but the few that he does have all have the same thing in common. They're dangerous, inflationary, and working people would pay the price.
Seriously? Sorry? I don't think we need any more, do we? No. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the Prime Minister has a keen interest in the mortgage market in California, but I'm talking about mortgage holders here. And whilst his government is consumed in law-breaking, chaos and division, working people are paying the price. This morning, I spoke to James in Selby. He's a police officer, working hard to keep people safe every day. The Tory mortgage penalty is going to cost him and his family £400 more each and every month. That's nearly £5,000. He told me this morning, they may not want to hear this, he told me this morning that they've decided to sell their house, to downsize, and he's just told his children they're going to have to start sharing bedrooms. Why should James and his family pay the cost of the Prime Minister's failure?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope when the honourable gentleman was talking to James, he explained that his economic policies would make James's situation worse, Mr. Speaker. And it's not just me saying that, Mr. Speaker. The Independent Institute of Fiscal Studies says his policy of never-ending debt and borrowing would damage James because it would increase inflation and drive up interest rates, leaving James and everybody else in this country poorer, Mr. Speaker. The IMF has said that our plan prioritises not what is politically easy, but what is right for the British people. That is what responsible economic leadership looks like, Mr. Speaker.
James and his family will have been listening to that Prime Minister. And their plight should keep them awake at night, because over the next few years, 7.5 million people are going to be in the same boat, all paying the Tory mortgage penalty, month after month after month. The situation is so dire that repossessions are already up 50%, a total betrayal of the idea that if you work hard, you'll get on. So what's the Prime Minister going to do to make sure more families don't lose their homes?
Mr. Speaker, I know he's reading from his prepared script, but he failed to actually listen to the answer that I gave. Well, I did actually spell out in detail what we are doing, Mr. Speaker. We've increased the generosity of support for mortgage interest scheme. We did that proactively in advance. We've also established a new FCA consumer duty that will protect borrowers, for example, by allowing them to extend their mortgage terms or switch to interest-only mortgages. And we have spent tens of billions of pounds supporting households with living costs. Those are the practical steps that we are taking to help James and other families who are facing these situations. But what I would say, because he mentioned mortgage arrears and repossessions, I am pleased to say, Mr. Speaker, they are actually running at a level today that is below when we entered the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, because of the actions that we're taking. But more importantly than that, perhaps, Mr. Speaker, is that they are also running 3 times lower than the level we inherited from the last Labour government.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure from the vantage point of his helicopter, everything might look fine. But that's not the lived experience of those on the ground. After 13 years of economic failure across the country, people are paying the price of uncosted, reckless, damaging decisions by the Tory party. And even now, as mortgages go through the roof, the Prime Minister is planning to wave through honours and peerages for those who cause misery for millions. What does it say about this government that while working people are worrying about mortgage hike, paying the bills, even repossessions, the Tory party is rewarding those guilty of economic vandalism?
Mr. Speaker, no amount of personal attacks and petty point scoring can disguise the fact that the honourable gentleman does not have a plan for this country, Mr. Speaker. He comes here every week to make the same petty points. We are getting on and delivering for this country. Yes, Mr. Speaker, inflation is a challenge. That's why we are on track to keep reducing it. We are reducing waiting lists. We are stopping the boats, all while he is focused on the past, focused on the politics. It's all talk, whereas from this government and from this Prime Minister, we deliver for the country.